do what he believes is right. I guess his parents encourage him to. Sean Irons Jr. Come on, Sean.
So first, once again, I want to thank the Stockbridge group, because that's how I was nervous. I mean, like, I came here, my stomach was all like, Then I ate rice and mac and cheese and beef. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just want to thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to get started. As you said, my name is Sean, as you guys heard, so here's my message. God had many people that were examples for our lives. People like Noah, Abraham, Joseph, Moses, Peter, and Paul were meant to show how our lives should be as victorious Christians. All of these people were great examples of the Christian walk, with its triumphs and failures, and its mountains and valleys. Today, I would like to talk about one person that I feel we can all relate to. This person, as we also do, struggled on their Christian walk. But, as we also should do, had many victories through God. This person is King David. Let's pray. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for this day. Thank you for waking us up so that we can breathe in the breath and winds that you made for us. I just want to pray that you would just help me to preach the word that you've laid on my heart, Lord, and I'll be able to preach it well, Lord, that I'll be able to speak to the hearts of this congregation. Thank you for everything you've done and everything you will do. In Jesus' name, amen. So before King David was King David, he was really just Shepherd David, tending his father's sheep, singing songs, and playing his harp. And like David, our lives outside of God are pretty routine. But also like David, and unlike others, we as victorious Christians have something in our lives that breaks our normal routine, and that is life in Christ. Like David, we can do amazing things with God, even if we aren't, kings and queens. Let's look at 1 Samuel 16, verse 6. Say amen when you get there. Alright. So it was when they came that he looked at Eliab and said, "Surely the Lord's anointed is before him." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, "Neither hath the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither hath the Lord chosen this one." Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen these." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all the young men here?" And Jesse said, "There remains yet the youngest. There he is, keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down till he comes here." So he sent and brought him in. Now he was ready, with bright eyes and good looking. And the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is the one." And Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David, and that day forward. So Samuel rose and went to Ramah. So I know that in this part of David's life, what I just said, it doesn't really have a lot to do with David, so to speak. He was really just kind of crowned king. But it goes to show that, God chose David the same way God has chosen us after we accept him into our hearts to go out and do great things. Speaking of great things, one thing that David really did do that was great with God was defeat Goliath. So next, I wanted to look at 1 Samuel 17, chapter 17, verse 4. And before I talk on that, I just want to, I know you guys are like, it's the story of David and Goliath. We all know the story. And we heard it 100 times. But today I want to talk about it 101 times because I really want to help you, show what I have seen and help you see how God plays such a vital role in this part of David's life and how it can go to show how we can really relate to the story of David and Goliath. So in verse 4 it says, "And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels. And the shield bearer went before him. And he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel, and said to them, Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Now, I really don't think that people understand just how big Goliath was. Let's put it into perspective. Y'all know Kevin Durant, right? I know you know Kevin Durant. So let's take Kevin Durant and his height, and then let's throw in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his muscles, and then let's train him to fight since he was my age. Okay, let's say he's maybe 25 now. So I know y'all understand it now, just how crazy the situation is. He's huge, and not only in stature but also in confidence. You see how he's so confident in himself that he goes out against the entire army and is saying, I can defeat your best warrior and you will become our servants. And now I want to skip down to verse 17. So in verse 17, I'm not going to read, I'm just going to go over it real quick. In verse 17, it talks about how Jesse tells his son, David, to go out and take some bread and some cheese to his brothers. And that, when I was reading that, I didn't really see it before, but then when I read it, I was like, that's crazy. I never really thought about how David was there on that particular day. And you never really think about it what if David went, before Goliath had made the challenge, or after, the battle was won or something like that. But God aligned it so meticulously that he put, his dominoes there. And he put David and Jesse and Goliath and all his little pieces in order so that it can play out the way he wanted it to. So then, go down to verse 26. And, David goes down to the camp, and he brings the bread and cheese that his father said to his brothers. And then we see that he's talking with his brothers, and he hears Goliath blaspheming the name of God and blaspheming the name of Israel. And to that, he says, Then David spoke to the men who stood before him, saying, What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So as you see right there, David is, he's mad. You know what I'm saying? If he hears this man talking about his God, talking about his king, his nation, and he's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Because that's a bad word back then. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that wants to come up to us and say, who is your God? Your God is nothing compared to us. He's going around the camp, saying, who's this uncircumcised Philistine? I'll fight him. I'll take this man down. He's got nothing on God. And then someone who works under Saul hears him and takes him to the king. And then David, when David comes to meet King Saul, he says, if no one else will fight this man, I'll fight him. And then Saul's like, you're just a boy. And Goliath, who is a giant, has been fighting and training since he was a boy your age. And then David says to King Saul, in verse 34, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it, and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its head, and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Oh, okay. So right here, I just want to focus on the fact that, David has confidence in God also. You know what I'm saying? We as Christians should be able to, have confidence in God, be trusting in God, be faithful in God, to know that, no matter what happens, the Lord will always be with us. And no matter what we face, God will always be stronger than what we face. And what David's saying right here is, he delivered me from the lion. He delivered me from a bear. And this Philistine is, no different from the rest of them. And then later in the passage, we see Saul, seeing that he can't stop David from going out. He tries to help him. And it says, so Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. And he put them in his shepherd's bag in a pouch with sand. In a pouch which he had, and his sling in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So David, as I said before, has confidence in himself, and he also has more confidence in God, knowing that he will deliver him. And in verse 41, it says, so the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. So as I said earlier, Goliath was not only, large in stature, but he was also large in confidence. But the bad thing about him having confidence is that it's only in himself, like I said before. But unlike David, who had confidence in God, So David had confidence in God, while Goliath had confidence in himself. And then to what Goliath said, David says, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines, the birds of the air, and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all his assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, but the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed with the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of with sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. David ran towards Goliath. And I feel like we can take that and put into our own lives when we see our own giants, the problems that we face in our everyday lives. And like David, who had confidence in God, we should have confidence and faith in God and be able to run at our problems and charge them and overtake them and defeat them and be victorious. Because that is what God has called us to do. And with God, we shall be victorious no matter what.